I sat in the rocking chair in the living room, my fingers tracing the shallow groove on the armrest over and over. George had carved it with a pocket knife during our first year in this house. He said it was so I could wait for him right there, just like we waited for the first rose to bloom every spring. The roses outside were in full bloom now, nodding gently with each breeze. I planted them myself, the very first batch George and I put in together. The old house was unnervingly quiet, so quiet that even the ticking clock sounded like a reminder. It's just me now. I've lost count of how many times I've closed my eyes in this chair, only to open them to no one calling me to dinner. No Miles racing down the stairs, begging me for one more story like he used to. George has been gone for 3 years. It happened so suddenly. And Miles, it's been years since he last came home. 3 months ago I mailed Christmas cookies to him and Max wrapped them in layer after layer of foil. And what came of it? Not even a card. If it weren't for that email he sent a few days ago, I would have thought he'd erased me completely. Mom, things are a bit rough right now. Mary got reassigned at work and my project ended, so I'm waiting on something new. Max needs rides and we're juggling a lot. If you're thinking of a change in scenery, maybe you could come stay with us for a while, help each other out. I read it over and over, unsure if it even counted as an invitation. But no matter how carefully worded he made it sound, my heart fluttered. For a moment I saw a sliver of hope. Maybe this was a chance, a door cracked open, for me to step back into his life. I made up my mind that same day. 3 days later I called a real estate agent. Houses aren't selling well in town right now, the young woman said as she sat in my kitchen flipping through paperwork. Are you sure you want to let this one go? Your husband left it to you. Don't you want to keep it? We were married for 40 years, I said. Yes, he left the house. But he's gone. And he left me behind. Now I want to be near the ones who are still living. I checked my bank accounts. Between what I had and the sale, I'd have $500,000. More than enough to live comfortably for a long time. But I wasn't going to Miles because I needed the money. I just didn't want to sit in that chair alone anymore, watching the roses bloom and wither and bloom again. When I packed, I clipped the brightest rose from the bush, wrapped its stem in a damp paper towel and tucked it carefully into my bag. George loved that one the most. It grew by the kitchen window and always bloomed first. You're coming with me, I whispered. That morning I stood on the porch and looked back at the empty house like I was looking at a version of myself from another lifetime. I didn't cry. I just pulled the door shut gently, maybe for the last time. The sunlight outside the airport was cold, like brushed metal. The air was dry and the city carried that unmistakable scent of unfamiliarity, one I could never quite describe but always recognized. Miles didn't come to pick me up. He'd sent a text. A last-minute video meeting came up. Told me to grab a cab and let myself in. There was a keypad on the front door. I sat in the back seat of the taxi watching the road slip by inch by inch. It felt like the day I put him on the bus to college, watching through a window as the world moved on without me. He was one of the biggest decisions of my life. But it had been a long time since he hugged me the way he used to, tight and without hesitation, like he never wanted to let go. The driver helped carry my suitcase up the front steps. I pressed the doorbell. A few minutes later Mary answered. Her smile was perfectly polite. Hi Adela. Was the trip okay? Come in. Max is still finishing up his online class. He'll come say hi in a bit. I nodded. She looked thinner than in the last photo I saw, dressed in a tailored suit, not a hair out of place. Before I could thank her, she had already turned and walked away. The house they rented wasn't small, but the living room was cluttered. Max's toys were scattered by the couch, and the breakfast dishes were still sitting on the dining table. The air smelled faintly of old cheese and baby shampoo. Your room's this way, Mary said, pointing to a door that led downstairs. We cleared out the storage room in the basement a little. You might have to make do for a few days. It's not much. I followed her gesture. A steep staircase led to a dimly lit half-underground space. I didn't ask for much. I just gave a small smile. As long as there's a bed, I'll be fine. The basement, well, it did have a bed. A narrow twin bed pushed up against the wall, next to an old desk. The walls were stained with moisture and a few cardboard boxes sat untouched in the corners. When I sat down, a dull ache sparked in my ankle, an old problem flaring up whenever it got damp. I opened my suitcase and gently took out the rose. It had wilted a bit but still held its shape. I found a glass, filled it with water, and placed the rose in it on the desk beneath the basement's one half-sized window. You still came with me, I whispered to it. That evening Max came down the stairs. He wore a hoodie with cartoon dinosaurs and stood at the landing, eyeing me for a second before scrunching up his nose. When are you leaving this time? He asked. I blinked, caught off guard, about to reply when Mary's voice came from the kitchen. Max, we don't talk like that. But Dad said she's just staying for a bit, he muttered. Once she's done visiting, she's going home. I stood there at the bottom of the stairs, watching his shadow flicker on the steps above, feeling like I had wandered into someone else's story, like I was playing a part that no longer belonged to me. I closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and listened to the clatter of dishes and muffled laughter from upstairs. They were having dinner. No one called me. I looked down at the watch George had left me. Ticked steadily just like it had all those years. Unchanging. But I knew, some things had changed. Changed for good. I woke up early the next morning, not because I'd slept well but because the pain in my knee was unbearable. The basement was cold and damp and I'd hardly gotten a wink of sleep all night. The bedding was a makeshift patchwork, just a thin layer that did little to fend off the chill seeping in through the corners of the walls, no matter how tightly I curled up. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the rose that was now nearly wilted. The basement had only a half-sized window and even that seemed to be coated in dust. The morning sun didn't make it through. I missed home, not the house but the feeling. The smell of fresh bread baking in the oven, sunlight spilling across the balcony, the kitchen always humming with warmth. Around 9 I made my way upstairs, knees stiff and creaky like rusted hinges. Mary was about to leave, dressed in heels and a sleek business suit, one hand gripping her coffee, the other flying across her phone's screen. "Morning, Adela," she said without looking up, her words rushed and clipped. "There's toast in the fridge. Max is in the living room. I'm running late, let's catch up tonight." I nodded, but before I could say a word she was out the door. In that moment I felt like a tenant, not family, not a guest. Just someone temporarily slotted into the house. A variable. Max was curled up on the couch playing video games, headphones on, controller in hand. The volume on the TV was cranked up, and the characters on screen were shouting over each other. I stepped closer gently. "Max, would you like some milk?" He paused his game and glanced sideways at me. "I want cereal. Do you know where it is?" I hesitated. "Probably in the cupboard. Let me check." I rummaged through the kitchen, found the cereal and milk and brought it over to him. He didn't say thank you. Just slipped his headphones back on and resumed the game. I stood there holding the spoon I hadn't put down yet, unsure whether I should sit or head back to the basement. Then out of nowhere he called out, "Grandma, my game console's busted. Can you buy me the new one? Tony has it at school, I want it too." I replied softly, "Maybe next weekend we can go to the store together and take a look." He pouted. "The one you got me last time is already old. I don't even bring it to school anymore. Didn't you say you moved here to spend time with me?" I nodded but said nothing. Spend time. Did that mean I was supposed to say yes to everything he asked for? Before lunch I sat by the tiny kitchen window staring out into nothing. There was barely any light in the window well, but I could just about get a signal. When I unlocked my phone I saw a voice message from Beatrice. "Hey sis, you must have arrived yesterday, right? I passed by Max's neighborhood today, almost rang the doorbell," she said with a soft laugh. "But I didn't want to interrupt your reunion. Come over when you've got time, the kids are still craving your apple pie." As I listened, something in me welled up, sudden and sharp. I wanted to cry, but the message I sent back was breezy and light. "I'll come by once things settle a bit here, promise." I actually believed it then, that if I just gave it some time things would slowly get better. Around noon Miles finally showed up. He was wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and looked exhausted as he rifled through the fridge. "No one bothered to clean any of this out?" I stood up quickly. "I can go to the store, pick up some fresh vegetables. I'll cook dinner tonight if you'd like." He glanced at me, expression unreadable. "We'll just order in. Mary's working late, no need to go to any trouble." The way he said it, it was like he'd quietly decided I'd taken over the household chores. I swallowed hard, biting back the words that rose in my throat. "I didn't come here to be your maid." At lunch, the three of us sat around the table, wrapped in an awkward silence. Max scrolled through his tablet between bites. Mary was glued to her phone, replying to emails. Miles sat across from me, tapping his fingers on a stack of bills. Mom, he said suddenly without looking up, the house situation's been tight. Rent, utilities, Max's education fund. It's all a lot right now. There was no introduction, no context. Just that. Like I was supposed to know where this was going. I set down my fork and looked at him. Maybe he felt the tension because he didn't say anything else after that. I barely touched my food. My stomach growled, but the vegetables were overcooked, the meat dry. It all tasted like paper. I wiped my mouth gently with a napkin, got up and began clearing the dishes. No one stopped me. No one offered to help. That night, back in the basement, I opened my phone and scrolled through old photos. One was from years ago when Max was little and I'd taken him to the park. He was on top of a slide, laughing like the sun lived inside him. He used to beg to sleep in my arms, and every time I visited he'd climb into my lap and say, "Grandma's hands smell the best." He changed. Of course he had. They all had. I closed the phone, took a deep breath and pushed the weight in my chest back down where it came from. During the 2 weeks I'd been staying at Miles's place, I kept telling myself that if I just did a little more, waited a little longer, they would eventually let me in. It was the same when Mary had just given birth to Max. Miles was overwhelmed, emotional, and barely holding it together. But even then, in the quiet of the night, he'd still call and ask, "Mom, why won't Max stop crying?" I would talk him through it, how to hold him, how to gently pat his back. Sometimes he wouldn't say anything at all. I knew he just needed to hear a familiar voice. So I thought, maybe this time too they just needed time to adjust. I tried cooking dinner. Nothing too fancy. Braised chicken with roasted potatoes, using a bottle of olive oil I'd brought from home. George's favorite. The kitchen was cramped, the spices cluttered and mismatched, but I found what I needed bit by bit, all while coaxing Max to finish his homework. Halfway through he groaned. "Grandma, I don't want to do this. It's due tomorrow, just write it for me." I smiled. "Why don't you tell me what you want to say? I can help you draft it." He slammed his pencil down. "You're so annoying." I said, "Write it, just do it." I froze, startled. Before I could say anything, he stormed off to his room and slammed the door behind him. His notebook flipped halfway shut, a few words scrawled across the page. Messy, but he'd tried. When dinner was ready, Mary stepped into the kitchen and frowned. "Adela, I appreciate the cooking," she said, her voice calm but clipped. "But we're trying to get Max to handle his own assignments. You really don't need to give in to every little thing he asks for." I looked up. I wasn't doing it for him. I know you meant well, she cut in, voice still polite but with boundaries as clear as glass. But he's already used to getting his way too easily. We're trying to set some limits. I nodded, saying nothing. Miles came home during dinner. He looked tired, gave me a nod like you would a neighbor in passing. I placed the dishes on the table and sat off to the side, waiting for them to start eating. They barely ate. Max picked at a potato or two. "This doesn't taste like Mom's chicken soup," he said. I gave a small smile. I added rosemary. "Just a little." Miles swallowed and said, "Mom, we were actually just talking this afternoon. If you're planning on staying here longer term, maybe we should figure out a way to split the rent?" My fork froze midair. "I'm not saying you have to," he added quickly. "It's just, life here's expensive and we're still trying to save up for a down payment." I nodded, silent for a moment before finally saying, "I understand. If things are tight, I get it." "That's great," he said, sounding relieved. "Because this month's rent is hitting us especially hard." I didn't say much after that. I didn't do the dishes either. Back downstairs I reached for the rose. Its edges were curling in. The water in the bottle had nearly run dry. I filled it back up, quietly from the kitchen tap. Careful not to make a sound. The morning after Miles sat me down like a client to discuss rent, I found myself out on the balcony, phone in hand, scrolling through my contacts until I landed on Beatrice. The call barely rang twice before she picked up. "Hello," I said. Her voice was low but alert. "Sis? I was just making tea. What's going on?" I hesitated, then spoke. "I want to come stay with you. Just for a few days. I'm not trying to cause trouble, I need to get out of here." She paused, maybe imagining what the past few days had been like for me. Then her voice came through warm and steady. "Come right now. I'll come get you. Don't explain too much. And don't feel like you're wrong for leaving." For a moment I thought I might cry. But I didn't pack right away. Instead, I sat there, quiet in the sun, letting the warmth settle on my shoulders. I looked down at the parking space below where Mary's white SUV sat perfectly aligned, just like her, precise, controlled. Max came out, surprised to see me on the balcony. "Grandma, you're leaving?" I nodded gently. "Your Granny Beatrice is picking me up. I'm going to stay with her for a bit." He furrowed his brow. "But can you buy me the game console before you go? Tony already got the new one. I'm the last kid in my class who doesn't have it." I gave a tired smile and said, "Max, some things, you just can't expect other people to give you." He didn't answer. Just frowned deeper and walked back inside, slamming the door behind him. I went downstairs and reached for the suitcase I hadn't fully unpacked. The zipper stuck from being opened and closed too many times. I gently wrapped the now nearly dried rose and placed it carefully on top. They were still in the bedroom and study, lost in their routines. I didn't interrupt. I was just pulling the front door open when Miles came out of the kitchen. "You're really leaving?" he asked. I met his eyes, my voice soft but steady. "For now." He let out a breath. "We just thought maybe you'd bring up the rent yourself. But, if money's tight, we could spot you some, just for basic living expenses." I said nothing. Mary passed by carrying Max's backpack. She glanced at me. "Let's stay in touch, Adela. Safe travels." I nodded. As I stepped out, I took the house key from my pocket and placed it behind the little flower pot by the door, the same spot they usually kept the spare. I had no plans to take anything of theirs with me. Not their belongings. Not their feelings. But the rose that I took with me. Beatrice's old gray SUV pulled slowly into the driveway, stopping in front of the townhouse Miles and Mary were renting. The front yard had just been roughly trimmed by the property management company. I stood there waiting in the breeze, coat pulled tight. As soon as she stepped out, Beatrice opened her arms wide. "I'm here, sis. Don't say a word. Just get in the car." I didn't smile, just nodded. That sting behind my eyes hadn't fully faded, but I knew more than ever how much I needed that embrace. He tucked my suitcase into the trunk without fuss. We didn't say much. She turned on the car stereo, let it play some oldies on the radio and hummed quietly as she drove, like she was mending something in me, gently waiting for me to be ready to speak. I stared out the window as we moved from the outskirts of town through the city center, then out toward an older residential area on the east side. Beatrice lived in a renovated duplex with a small front yard filled with poppies and rosemary. A wind chime hung near the porch, tinkling with every breeze. "We're home," she said, rolling down the window. "Tell me this doesn't feel warmer than your son's place." I gave a small nod and managed a faint smile. "Those pots on the windowsill, yours?" "Of course," she said. "The kids say I keep house better than any of them." Her home really was different. The moment you stepped inside, it opened into a bright open kitchen that flowed into the dining area. A basket of fresh bananas and walnuts sat on the table, alongside a few birthday cards. Elise, her granddaughter, had sent them just last week. The walls were covered in framed photographs. Thanksgiving dinners, backyard barbecues, road trips. Beatrice in aprons, Beatrice holding luggage, Beatrice laughing with her children. Her life had presence. Continuity. People who cared. She opened the curtain in the guest room. "This one gets the best light. Morning sun hits the bed right through the window, just like your old bedroom." I didn't answer. I just slowly unzipped my suitcase and pulled out the nearly dried rose. Beatrice stepped closer and saw it. "You brought it." "Yeah," I said softly, placing it gently into the clear vase she'd already set out. "I remember that bush. George planted it." "It's the last bloom from that patch," I whispered. "I was going to leave it by Max's bed, but he didn't even say thank you." She sighed, her voice warm but firm. "Sis, you've spoiled them all. This isn't just about Miles. You've always been too afraid to disappoint anyone." Over lunch, Beatrice's daughter Martha called on video. The screen lit up with a blur of motion, her 3 kids bustling around the kitchen, giggling as they made cupcakes. Martha wore an apron, holding a mixing bowl in one hand and her phone in the other. "Mom, we're making that red velvet recipe you taught me. What are you up to?" "I'm having lunch with your Aunt Adela. She just moved in for a few days." "Aunt Adela." Martha beamed, waving at the camera. "You finally made it. Once the cupcakes are done, I'll send some your way. But the frosting's still better when you make it." Watching them, something warm and unfamiliar stirred in my chest. So this was what it felt like to be thought of, missed. It was light, like breathing in spring air after a long gray winter. Your daughter's already way better than my son, I said to Beatrice with a smile. I looked at the screen again. Martha's kids were loud and laughing, elbowing each other for turns decorating the cupcakes. One little girl with pigtails leaned in and asked, "Auntie Grandma, are you gonna live at Grandma's house forever now? Can we come see you?" I nodded. Of course you can. And when you do, I'll bake you my blueberry pie. They cheered, genuinely excited, their voices rising in a chorus of joy. My kids always say Aunt Adela was the best arts and crafts teacher when they were little, Martha added with a grin. Beatrice passed me the phone. Hear that? That's how real people treat family. After the call ended, I let out a quiet sigh. Beatrice turned to me, her eyes gentle but clear. They're not richer than Miles. Not smarter. But they're grateful. They look back. They say thank you. That's what makes a family. I didn't say anything. My throat tightened, but somewhere deep inside something began to loosen. That afternoon we went to the market together. Beatrice insisted we take the street lined with open-air flower stalls, said the light was better there and the breeze too. I carried a basket filled with tomatoes and strawberries, and somewhere between the scent of herbs and the hum of voices, I felt it, that sense of being in life again. Present. Not just passing through. On the way home, Beatrice suddenly said, "Have you ever asked yourself why you feel so lonely?" I didn't answer right away. Just murmured, "It's because you've spent your whole life taking care of everyone like they're your children," she said. "But you never learned how to say no to them." I lowered my head. "It's not that they don't see what you do or how you're doing," she went on. "It's that they know. No matter how badly they treat you, no matter how much they take, you'll stay. You won't walk away." I stayed quiet, letting the words settle. "So they don't bother to look back," she said gently. My nose stung. A sharp, sudden ache behind my eyes. He was right. I told myself I went to Miles's house for family, for reunion, but there hadn't been a single place in that house where I felt at home. They didn't want to hear me, didn't need me to be part of anything. No matter how much I tried, I was just someone passing through. Someone already halfway gone. But I wasn't disposable. I had a pension, savings, skills, a life I could rebuild. I had value, real, solid, undeniable value. I'd just gone so long without admitting that to myself. That night I slept better than I had in weeks. The quilt was soft cotton linen, still carrying the scent of sunshine. The air in the room was dry and quiet. Even the breeze against the window sounded like a lullaby. I dreamt of a kitchen glowing in sunlight, warm dough rising on the counter, children laughing in the background. George was there, drying his hands with a dish towel. No one asked me when I was leaving. No one cared how much money I had in my purse. When I woke, the rose on the nightstand was still there. It looked a little more alive than it had the day before. Life at Beatrice's house flowed like a quiet stream, steady, unhurried, but full of warmth. I'd been staying there for nearly a week. Each morning began with a pot of tea and tending to her little patch of herbs. Then we'd head to the market or spend a few hours at the local craft center. The days passed gently, like warm dough rising in the sun. I'd only told Miles once during the first 2 days that I had moved in with Beatrice and wouldn't be coming back. I didn't reach out after that. He didn't call either, not even to ask if I was okay or to check whether Max had said something hurtful, or to explain what he'd said at the dinner table. There was just silence. As if my leaving was expected. As if it was overdue. That afternoon I suddenly realized I'd left my old pill organizer at Miles's house, on the nightstand in the basement. It held my gout medication, which I refilled regularly from a pharmacy back home. After a few days without it, the ache had started creeping back. Beatrice offered to go with me, but I didn't want to turn it into an event. So while she was out running errands, I called a car and went alone. The townhouse looked exactly the same as when I'd left. The lawn was still unkempt, the trash bins were tipped over, and the house number hung crookedly on the wall. I entered the passcode and eased the door open quietly. No one was around. From upstairs I could hear Max's video game blaring, probably in the middle of an afternoon tournament. I headed straight to the basement. Everything was just as I'd left it. The bedding still rumpled, the air still slightly musty. My pill organizer sat untouched on the nightstand, as if no one had even noticed I'd been gone. I picked it up ready to leave when I heard footsteps upstairs. And then Miles's voice. I froze at the foot of the stairs. Something in me told me not to move. She's going to have to give us something eventually, he said. Otherwise we can forget about buying that house. Mary replied quietly, too soft for me to make out the words. Miles spoke again, more sharply this time. We never meant for her to stay that long anyway. The whole point of having her come was to feel things out, see how much money she might be sitting on. And now she's gone and we've got no excuse to ask. The seller's stalling, waiting to see who flinches first. I stood there, cold settling into my bones like a winter draft. So that's what it was. I hadn't been invited to reconnect or to help out or to be part of anything. I was a financial strategy. A talking point in a long-term plan. They'd brought me there not out of love but as a lever. I remembered now. Mary had mentioned the landlord might be looking to sell. I'd brushed it off then. I never imagined it had anything to do with me. But now it was clear. My presence had been a tactic. My life, my savings, reduced to a step in their real estate negotiations. I tightened my grip on the pill organizer and backed away slowly, careful not to let the door make a sound. When I got back to Beatrice's house, my fingers were still ice cold. She had just returned from the market, a basket of groceries in hand. The moment she saw me standing frozen on the porch, she rushed over. "What happened?" she asked, frowning as she slid the key into the door. "You look pale." I didn't answer right away. It wasn't until we stepped inside, and I hadn't even taken off my shoes, when I finally spoke. I just heard Miles. In the kitchen. Talking to Mary. She froze, her keys still dangling in the lock. What did he say? I stared at the bag of apples in her hand, my voice so faint it nearly disappeared. He said the only reason they had me come was to feel out how much money I had. That I wasn't really welcome. They'd already calculated how to get me to help buy the house. Beatrice set the bag down and turned fully toward me. He actually said that? I nodded. His exact words were, "She's going to have to give us something eventually. Otherwise we'll never be able to buy that house." She didn't respond right away. Just looked at me, steadily, silently, like she was waiting for me to get the rest out. And I did. But my voice didn't shake this time. It's not that I never considered helping them be. I actually planned to, once things settled. I thought maybe I'd offer part of what I made from selling my house, help them with a down payment. But now I see it. To them I'm not a mother. I'm a bank account. A landlord with a warm smile. Beatrice exhaled, her voice soft but resolute. You offering help, that's generosity. But you choosing not to? That doesn't make you the villain. They don't fail to understand me, I said, and the exhaustion in my chest felt like a truth finally spoken aloud. They just don't care. They only care if I'm useful. Beatrice stepped forward and took my hands in hers. So, what are you going to do? I looked up, my voice calm and even. I'm going to buy that house. Her eyebrows lifted. They want it, don't they? I said slowly. Well, I'm not going to stop them from wanting it. But this time, I'll be the one to act first. Beatrice nodded and something flickered in her eyes, a spark I'd never seen before. You finally get it, she said. You're not stealing their future. You're reclaiming your dignity. That afternoon I contacted the real estate agent. The reply came quickly. Yes, the townhouse was quietly listed on a private platform. The owners were an older couple getting ready to retire and relocate to Florida. They were eager to sell and looking for a buyer who wouldn't complicate things. Are you able to make a cash offer? The agent asked over the phone. Someone else has shown interest, but their mortgage approval is still pending. I'll pay in cash, I said without hesitation. My voice was calm, steady, not a single pause. Even I was surprised by how certain I sounded. In that case, there's a good chance you'll have priority, the agent replied. We can do a remote walkthrough tomorrow. No need for you to be there in person. I hung up and sat still, heart pounding from that one sentence. Pay in cash. It echoed in me longer than I expected. That evening, I sat by the window and took down the rose that had nearly dried out. With a pair of scissors, I gently trimmed away the outer petals, crisp and brittle, revealing the flower's center where a faint trace of color still lingered. It was almost gone. I knew that. But I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. This rose was like me. Pulled from someone else's home, left to dry out, ignored, no longer seen as useful. But that wasn't the end. It was just a signal. That version of me was done. Now it was time for a new beginning. From this moment on, I would live for myself. A few days later, the agent called back. All the paperwork's complete, Ms. Adela. You are now the official owner of the townhouse. There will be a routine property inspection soon, she added. We'll coordinate the time with the current tenants. I ended the call and placed my teacup gently on the table. Outside, a breeze lifted the edge of the curtain, sending it swaying like a slow breath. And for a moment I was taken back, decades ago when George first brought me to the little house we ended up living in for 30 years. The wind had felt just like this. He asked me, "Can you see yourself living here for the rest of your life?" I hadn't thought too hard back then. I just knew he was standing beside me and that was enough. But now I had to learn to stand beside myself. It was a Saturday, the day of the house showing. The agent had already informed Miles, but she hadn't told him who the buyer was. That was exactly how I wanted it. No drama. No pretense. Just the truth, revealed when it needed to be. Beatrice insisted on coming along. "I'm not letting you face that man alone." I smiled. This time I'm not walking in with my head down. We waited just outside the neighborhood gate until the agent arrived. A sharp, no-nonsense Asian woman with efficient movements and a neutral, professional tone. "The tenants are home," she said, unlocking the door. "I'll step in first and let them know we're here." I stared at that familiar door. For a moment I pictured Max standing there that night asking for the newest game console. Back then I thought he was just being childish. Now I knew better. His parents had taught him early how to ask upward. A few minutes later the agent waved us in. I straightened, took a deep breath, and stepped into the house I once knew down to its smallest creak and scent. Mary sat on the couch flipping through a magazine. Miles leaned in the kitchen doorway, his arms crossed and his expression wary. When he saw me his eyes widened, caught off guard. "Mom," he said, his voice full of disbelief. What are you doing here?" I didn't answer him. I walked straight into the center of the living room and turned to the agent. "I'd like to check the basement first," I said evenly. I wasn't satisfied with the ventilation last time. She nodded briskly. "Of course. Today's the preliminary inspection, just confirming the disclosures." Mary stood up. "Wait, buyer? What do you mean, buyer?" I watched Miles's face shift. He turned slowly toward me, his voice suddenly quieter. "You're the buyer?" Only then did I meet his eyes, calm as if I were pouring a cup of tea. "Yes. The house belongs to me now." Mary went pale. Miles blinked, stunned. Why would you?" "That day I came to get my medicine," I said, cutting him off. "I heard you in the kitchen." He froze. "You said I'd eventually have to put up the money. That bringing me here was a way to see how much I had. And that once I left, you wouldn't have a reason to ask me anymore." His face darkened in an instant. "You were eavesdropping on us?" "It wasn't eavesdropping," I said and gave a soft, humorless smile. "I was standing right there. You just didn't care if I heard you or not." The room went still. Only Max's video game echoed faintly from upstairs, like it was coming from another universe entirely. Miles opened his mouth, maybe to argue, but no words came. Mary was the one to speak. Her voice was tight. "Adela, if you were planning to buy the house all along, why?" "I wasn't," I said, voice steady. "I had no plans. In fact, I was thinking of helping you. After selling my house, I had some savings and was considering offering part of it to help with a down payment. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could support you two in building some stability." I looked between them. "But then I heard what you said. And in that moment I understood, I don't owe you anything. Not 1 cent. Miles stepped forward, eyes sharp with emotion. "So this was what? Quebec? You wanted to humiliate us? You knew we were waiting on the seller and you—" "I didn't touch a penny of your money," I said firmly. "You treated me like I was standing in the way of your future. But you didn't realize, I was the one being used. Calculated. Exploited." The next 10 minutes were a blur of process. The agent moved efficiently. Signatures, photos, documents. Final walkthrough. Confirmation. Done. Miles and Mary stood stiff in the living room like two people caught in a downpour, unsure whether their silence came from shock, shame, or just plain disbelief. Before I stepped outside, I turned back to them. "I'm not reclaiming the house immediately," I said. The lease gives you 1 more month. I'll return then. No need to panic. Just remember, this place now belongs to someone else. I didn't wait to see their reaction. The door closed softly behind me. And for the first time in years I knew I had finally erased my name from their family roster of usefulness and stepped fully into a life of my own. Beatrice's home was always quiet, like the kind of place where no one needed to speak much to be fully understood. The poppies on the windowsill had bloomed again, and the kitchen still held the soft scent of last night's dinner. I sat in the living room, mending the loose seam of my old scarf while the radio played songs from another time. I thought today would be another peaceful day like that. Then the doorbell rang. Beatrice peeked out from the kitchen. "Did you order something?" I shook my head and set down the sewing kit. She went to open the door. I heard her gasp softly. "Hi, Aunt Beatrice." Miles's voice. It had that careful, practiced politeness I knew too well. He stood there holding a neatly packed gift bag. "Is my mom home?" "I came to see her." I stood up. There was no rush of emotion, no flicker of hope. Just a chill spreading quietly through my chest, like water left out too long, gone cold. Beatrice looked over at me. I gave her a nod before she stepped aside and let him in. Miles glanced around as he entered. The moment his eyes landed on me, he shifted his expression into a gentle, conciliatory smile. "Mom," he said, lowering himself into the chair across from me. I wanted to talk. About everything." He set the gift bag on the coffee table. "It's the tea biscuits you used to love. I went to that old shop you liked. I didn't reach for them. Didn't say a word." He cleared his throat and leaned forward in that way people do when they want to seem open. "I know I said some things that didn't come out right. Maybe made you feel like you weren't welcome. But honestly, we've been grateful you came to help us. Truly." So I said nothing. "So," he went on, "I realize this whole house thing, it might have been a heat-of-the-moment choice for you. But I was thinking, maybe if we can work something out. Keep it in the family. I mean, Max grew up there, it's his home too. You want me to sign it over to you?" I cut in. He hesitated. "Well, maybe start with a letter of intent. Something informal. We'd stay on, keep the place stable for Max." "So this is why you came," I said softly. "No, Mom. I came too." "You didn't come to talk," I said steady and clear. "You came to ask." He froze. I leaned back against the couch, voice still calm. "I understand wanting to build your life, wanting to give Max some stability. What I don't understand is dressing up your financial needs in the name of family, and using that to ask for my life savings." His face flushed. His voice cracked. "You're my mom. We're family. This isn't family." Beatrice, who had stayed quiet until then, stood up. Her voice was sharp, almost cutting. "Now you remember she's your mother?" Miles turned toward her, startled. "She raised you alone for years. You needed money for summer camp in elementary school. She cleaned 3 houses a day just to get it together. When you applied to college the year your father died, who co-signed your loan? Who bought you your first second-hand laptop?" Her words came out like a storm long held back. "You moved to another city for work. Who paid your rent for 3 months? Who mailed you cash and canned food when you were too broke to eat? And when did she ever ask for anything in return?" I wanted to tell her to stop, but my throat was tight. I couldn't. Beatrice took a step closer, placing herself between us. "You didn't just fail her, Miles. You used her. You said once she left, you wouldn't have a reason to ask her for money anymore. That's not neglect. That's disgrace. You don't deserve to call yourself her son." The room went still. Miles opened his mouth but nothing came out. I stood, reached out and gently pushed the gift bag back across the table. "Take it," I said. "I don't need it." His face had gone gray. His fingers curled around the bag's handles. I thought maybe there was still a chance." "You've thought too much," I replied. He walked to the door, slower than I remembered him ever walking. Each step seemed heavier than the last. When the door closed behind him, Beatrice came over and gently touched my shoulder. I stared at the door for a moment and something inside me clicked. The old me had always waited for him to turn around to say he missed me, needed me, wanted me back. But now I just wanted him to walk away for good. That night I went into the garden and clipped 2 fresh roses. I placed them in my old vase, alongside the dried bloom I'd brought from my former home. Old and new, side by side. Just right. Beatrice hummed a soft tune from the kitchen. Martha messaged me to say the kids had drawn cards they were mailing soon. Outside, the breeze was light, the curtains lifted gently, like they were applauding the evening sky. I sat down and wrote a postcard. Just one sentence. It's not that I don't love you, I've just finally learned how to love myself first. After Miles left, I stood by the kitchen window, watching the wind chime on the front porch sway gently in the breeze. Its soft, scattered notes sounded like a farewell, a delicate final goodbye to a life I had now truly left behind. Beatrice never brought up that day again. We simply returned to our days as if nothing had happened. She still went to the community center in the mornings for volunteer work. And I slowly began picking up the parts of myself I had once set aside. Baking, crafting, reading. When Miles moved out, I didn't go to see it. He never told me the date, just had the agent send a formal confirmation that they'd vacated. By the time I stepped back into that townhouse, the weather had already turned warm. The grass in the yard had grown tall. The house itself felt quiet, like a dream that had just barely let go of sleep. The scent had changed. Gone were Max's shampoo, Mary's perfume. In their place, dust, wood, and the kind of stillness that belongs to no one. I walked through each room one by one, remembering the first day I came. The awkward glances, the hollow small talk, the cold air in the basement. I had never felt like home. But now, it could. I hired a cleaning crew, replaced the flooring, repainted the living room. The old charcoal walls were gone, swapped for a warm, creamy beige. The curtains were cotton linen, just the way I liked. The leather sofa was replaced with a soft, sky blue one I found at a second-hand shop down the street. I only changed one thing in the kitchen. The bottle of olive oil I'd brought with me was still there. I cleaned it and placed it right by the stove, right where it belonged. The basement? No more bed. I turned it into a cozy workshop/storage room. My fabrics, paper crafts, and photo boxes had their place again. I even installed a climate control system. Never again would my joints ache from someone else's indifference. Then on the windowsill I planted new roses. Not from my old home. Not from Beatrice's garden. A new variety, pale in color, subtle in scent. Just like how I felt inside. It wasn't long before I joined Beatrice's community center. She'd been urging me to for weeks. You make felt animals 10 times better than the social workers, she'd tease. My first day there was a bright Friday morning. I brought a few old projects and a box of tools. I only meant to sit in the back and watch. But the moment I arrived, one of the coordinators, a kind woman with a spark in her eye, gently nudged me forward. We're short on someone to lead today's craft group, she said. Want to give it a try? I smiled and shook my head. I'm not a professional. You don't have to be, she said. You just have to be willing to share. And just like that, I led the group. That day's project was a memory frame, decorating picture frames with personal mementos. 10 or so older women sat around the table, some hard of hearing, some with trembling hands, but every single one of them smiled with real joy. Were you a teacher? One woman in a pink sweater asked me. I smiled. No. I was just someone who got forgotten when she wasn't useful anymore. She paused, then reached over and held my hand. Well, you're needed now. Thank you. From then on I taught weekly. Our group grew from crafts to small sharing circles. Eventually someone suggested, Adela, why don't you give a talk? Something like, the second half of life. You've got a story. We all need to learn how you got back up. I laughed at the idea. But someone had already written it into next month's schedule. The day of the talk the room was fuller than I expected. Some came in wheelchairs. Some brought their grandkids. One woman arrived with a homemade cake and said, We baked this to thank you for giving us courage. Standing at the front of the room I suddenly felt my voice catch. I'm not a specialist, I began. Not a speaker. I'm just a woman. A mother. An aging person once told she wasn't needed anymore. But now I have my own home. My own time. My own friends. And being important? That's not something other people get to decide. The applause lasted longer than I expected. That night I came home and stood by the rose plants. I clipped the dried stems and changed the water gently. And as I stood there, Max crossed my mind. I wondered if he'd broken that console by now. Or if he was still waiting for someone else to buy him a new one. But I wasn't angry anymore. I just understood now. Some children take longer to grow up. And I both as a mother and as a grandmother, had finally learned how not to wait. On my coffee table were a few new photos. One of me and Beatrice grinning with handmade badges. One of me surrounded by women at the center, proudly holding scissors and showing off our crafts. And one from Martha's kids, a card they'd made, taped with drawings of a white-haired woman holding garden shears, roses blooming behind her in the sun. Inside it read, "Grandma Adela, this is you. You're our superhero grandma." I laughed softly and placed the card in the center of the table. My life now felt like a mosaic. Old cracks, new pieces fit back together. They didn't have to be perfect. It just had to be mine. I first heard news of Miles from a neighbor. I was out in the yard trimming the roses when Mrs. Lunt, Beatrice's next-door neighbor, strolled over for a quick chat. "Did you hear your son moved into one of those little apartments over in Brookstone?" she asked casually, motioning toward the road. "The one on the corner by the main street." I turned slightly. "I thought they were waiting on a mortgage to buy a place?" He shrugged. "Heard the loan got delayed. And there were other things. Mary's working from home now, I think. Something about a job change. I was there the day they moved. Didn't seem like a happy day." I didn't press for more. Just went back to clipping the branches. But somewhere inside something stirred, like a thread gently tugged. His life, I thought, couldn't be easy now. But for once I didn't feel the urge to fix it. A few days later I received a strange package. No return address, just my name and street. Inside was a small worn wooden box. I knew it immediately. It held a bundle of old letters I'd written to Miles more than a decade ago. He was in college back then, living out of state, newly on his own. Every month I'd written him a letter, not filled with advice, just reminders. "It's getting cold, wear something warm. I'll send some money to your card next week. Don't forget your dentist appointment." I always assumed he'd tossed them away. But he'd kept them. And now he'd sent them back. There were new letters too, handwritten, folded in between the yellowed ones. "Max asks me every night if Grandma's coming back. I told him you're helping take care of other kids somewhere else. But really, I know we pushed you away. I found your letters in the bottom of my toolbox when I was packing. I read them over and over. It hit me, most of my life has been quietly held up by you. Now that the house is quiet, I think about how, when you were there, even if we didn't talk much, it felt like the light was always on." My eyes stung. It was like a door I had stood by for years, cold, unanswered, had finally heard a knock. I didn't call. Didn't write back. I placed the letters back in the wooden box and tucked it into the living room drawer, next to my craft lesson plans and old photo albums. It didn't belong in the drawer for wounds. Nor in the drawer for keepsakes. It was something else entirely, something still being redefined. 2 weeks later, after leading a memory collage frame workshop at the community center, one of the volunteers hurried over. "Adela, someone's here to see you." I stepped outside and saw Miles sitting on the bench outside the entrance. He wore a plain shirt and khakis. Held a paper bag in both hands. When he saw me, he stood visibly unsure. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said quickly. I nodded. He offered me the bag. "Max made this yesterday. He said you taught him how to collage. He hoped you'd want to see it." Inside was a wobbly cut photo frame, pieced together with bright paper. In the center was a picture of Max and me planting flowers in the garden. In the corner, in crooked marker letters, it read, "To Grandma Adela. I miss the cookies." I smiled. Not a smile of forgiveness, just one of release. Of softness. Miles looked at me, voice lower than I'd ever heard it. "I know I can't expect you to just let me back in. But I wanted you to know. I'm trying. Not just for you. For myself. And for Max. I don't want him to end up like I did. Ungrateful. Unaware." I gave him a small nod. "Then keep trying." We didn't hug. No tears. Just two weathered trees, resting a moment in the same quiet patch of shade. Before he left, he said, "If you're okay with it, I'd like to send you something from Max every month. Drawings maybe. I don't want him to lose the parts of you that matter." I agreed. Not for him, but for the little boy who still drew with crayons. That night I opened the drawer and took out the letters. This time I didn't put them back in the wooden box. I tied them together with a soft silk ribbon and placed them in a new folder. The label I wrote said, "The past still growing." And in that moment I realized, so was I. The days slipped into a steady rhythm. Twice a week I taught at the community center. Sometimes I'd take Beatrice to the flea market to hunt for second-hand treasures. We'd come home, brew a pot of tea, and I'd snip a few roses to place on the kitchen windowsill. On the first week of every month I'd get a little envelope from Max. Sometimes it held a new drawing. Other times just a sticky note with a single line. "Grandma, I won a writing contest at school. I wrote about you." I didn't write back. Not because I wasn't moved, but because I knew some relationships don't need to be hurried into healing. They grow back slowly like roots under soil. It was a Saturday, sunlight bright to the point of being unreasonable. I just finished pulling weeds in the yard and was rinsing my hands when the doorbell rang. I opened the door. It was Miles. No paper bag. No Max. Dressed casually, like a version of himself I hadn't seen since he was fresh out of high school. That slightly awkward, hopeful way he used to stand when he came to the door and called me Mom. "Do you have a little time?" he asked. "I was wondering if I could take you out for coffee." I dried my hands and nodded. We went to a little cafe near the corner. Not the one I usually go to, but one he'd picked. I didn't mind. Sometimes a new place helps you say old things better. We sat for a while in silence. He flipped through the menu and finally ordered a latte. "You still drink black tea?" he asked. I nodded. When my tea came, I cupped it in both hands, thumb tracing the rim of the cup slowly. "Mom," he said finally, "I've been thinking a lot lately. You were always there for me. And somewhere along the way, I stopped even looking at you." I didn't answer. Just looked up and met his eyes. "Back in college, I'd get your letters every month. You remembered every exam, every name of my friends. At the time I thought it was annoying. Too much." He gave a small, sheepish laugh. "But then I graduated, started work, got married, became a dad. And even though I needed your advice more than ever, I waited for you to ask. I never asked how you were. Never invited you on vacation. Never told Max anything about who you used to be." He looked up. His eyes were steady this time. "It hit me when you left. That everything you did wasn't because you had to. It was because you loved me." I stirred my tea gently. My voice barely more than a whisper. "I didn't stop caring about you. I just started trying to care about me too." He blinked. So I looked at him. "You're not the first to think a mother's love is a given. You won't be the last. But I can't keep being the kind of mother who only gives and is never seen." He nodded slowly. There was something heavy behind his eyes. Understanding, maybe. Or regret. "Can I take my time?" he asked. "Not to undo everything, but to let you know I'm trying. To be better. For you, for me, for Max. I don't want him to grow up and forget to be grateful." I replied quietly. "I won't stop you from becoming better. But remember, Miles, respect isn't something you say. Something you do. You want my help? Start by helping me. You want Max to grow up with empathy? Then it starts with you." He exhaled, long and slow, like something had finally landed. We talked for nearly an hour. No arguments. No tears. Just years of unspoken things, laid out gently and let go one by one. When we walked out, the sunlight fell across his shoulders. And for the first time I saw him not as the boy I once carried forward, but as a man who might now carry himself. He would stumble again, surely. He might still say the wrong thing. But I was no longer holding the weight of being responsible for everything he did. From now on we were two separate people, who might just learn to respect each other. It just so happened that we were also mother and son. When I got home, I opened the drawer and took out the latest card Max had sent. This time I wrote back. Just one sentence. "Thank you for remembering I like red velvet cake. Next time you visit, I'll teach you how to make the frosting." I sealed the envelope, pressed down the stamp, and set it by the door for mailing. Outside, the sunlight was just right. The roses in the garden had opened a few more blooms. In the living room, a new photo had joined the frame on the mantel. Me and Beatrice, arms around each other at the craft studio last week. I was holding the fabric tote I'd just finished sewing. Her smile was all laugh lines and joy. Suddenly, I remembered something. I walked into the living room, pulled open a drawer, and found a sticky note. I wrote a short message, then pressed it gently to the back of the front door. "Adela's house. Welcome." It wasn't for anyone else. It was for me. A quiet, steady welcome home.